Follow our new channel, All Scoops Media Sports.
Jason Brown is the leader of the AHK street gang. Prosecutors say this is him giving $500 to a man he thought would wire the money to an ISIS soldier. That man was really an informant for the feds.
This is Thaddeus Jimenez in 2015 driving his brand new Mercedes, just one of the perks of his newfound freedom. At the age of 13, he was wrongly sent to prison for murder. He was released in 2009 and won a $25 million judgment against the city. But prosecutors say Jimenez couldn't shake the streets and used his millions to build his gang.
41-year-old Donald Lee and 31-year-old Torrance Benson each now face mandatory sentences of life in prison. Prosecutors say the two were behind a string of murders, shootings, robberies, and narcotics trafficking cases stretching back 2 decades.
Chicago has a long history of gang activity, with numerous gangs vying for control of different neighborhoods. These gangs are involved in various criminal activities, including drug trafficking, violent crimes, and gun trafficking. This video provides detailed information on several key figures associated with some of the most notorious gangs in Chicago, highlighting their criminal activities and the legal consequences they have faced.
Also making news, he got his life back when he was finally released from prison after being wrongly convicted of murder. But now, this man, Thaddeus Jimenez, is back behind bars. Prosecutors say when he got his freedom, he turned to the gang life. This is Thaddeus Jimenez in 2015 driving his brand new Mercedes, just one of the perks of his newfound freedom. At the age of 13, he was wrongly sent to prison for murder. He was released in 2009 and won a $25 million judgment against the city. But prosecutors say Jimenez couldn't shake the streets and used his millions to build his gang.
Y'all don't understand, we are the police over here. We are the law enforcement. We are the rule government in our own communities. Self-sovereign. True royalty. Nobody above us.
They say Jimenez admitted to this 2015 shooting while pleading guilty to a gun charge.
Thaddeus T.J. Jimenez was associated with the Simon City Royals, a Chicago-based street gang. The Simon City Royals are known for their involvement in various criminal activities, including drug trafficking and violent crimes. Jimenez's gang involvement played a significant role in his life, both before and after his wrongful conviction. Thaddeus T.J. Jimenez, a Chicago native, was wrongfully convicted of murder at the age of 13. In 1993, he was accused of shooting 19-year-old Eric Morrow in the chest. Despite evidence pointing to another suspect, Juan Carlos Torres, Jimenez was convicted and sentenced to 45 years in prison. His conviction was based on the testimony of witnesses who later recanted their statements. Jimenez spent over 16 years in prison before being exonerated and released in 2009. After his release, Jimenez was awarded $25 million in a federal wrongful conviction lawsuit against the city of Chicago. However, his post-exoneration life took a downturn. In 2015, he was involved in gang activities and shot an acquaintance in the legs, which led to his arrest and a subsequent prison sentence. Jimenez's case is a stark example of the systemic issues within the criminal justice system, including wrongful convictions based on faulty eyewitness testimony and inadequate defense.
27-year-old Alexander Varela, a gang member with an extensive criminal record.
There was a petty argument between a couple of women, and this offender who lives on the block, who's a gang member, he's the one who chose to insert himself into the argument, okay? He wasn't at the party. He wasn't invited to the party.
It was the night of October 6th on the 2200 block of North Kilbourne in the Hermosa neighborhood. Police say Varela, accompanied by several others, approached the arguing women and demanded to know their gang affiliation, claiming the block as his own. They denied any, but soon others from the party came out of the house and the confrontation turned physical.
During the melee, Alexander Varela yelled out to his fellow gang members, "Bust, bust, bust," which was an order for the armed gang member to fire his gun.
According to prosecutors, it was precisely at this time that the 2-year-old Julien wandered out of the gate of the house where the party was being held and into the alley. An 18-year-old running away from the impending gunshots saw the toddler and grabbed him, but it was too late. Both of them were shot, Julien fatally. Varela is now charged with first-degree murder. The search for the man who pulled the trigger continues.
Alexander Varela, a gang leader of the maniac Latin disciples, was involved in a significant gang-related crime that resulted in the death of a 2-year-old boy named Julien Gonzalez. The incident occurred on October 6, 2018, during a birthday party where an argument escalated, leading Varela to order a fellow gang member to fire shots into a crowd. The shooting resulted in the tragic death of Julien Gonzalez. Following his arrest, Varela faced multiple charges, including first-degree murder. The specifics of his sentencing, however, are not detailed in the available sources. Given the nature of the charges and the circumstances of the crime, he likely faced a severe penalty, potentially a long-term prison
found
sentence.
the reputed leaders of the Wicked Town gang guilty of racketeering and murder. 41-year-old Donald Lee and 31-year-old Torrance Benson each now face mandatory sentences of life in prison. Prosecutors say the two were behind a string of murders, shootings, robberies, and narcotics trafficking cases stretching back 2 decades.
Leader Donald Lee and top associate Torrance Benson have been convicted in federal court. Lee and Benson are two of 13 people indicted in a multi-office investigation into a violent street gang on the west side. The others previously pled guilty and are awaiting their sentencing. U.S. Attorney John Lausch Jr. says the evidence revealed the extent of the violence the gang carried out to protect their drug trafficking operation, including 19 murders and 19 attempted murders.
Donald Lee, a leader of the Wicked Town faction of the traveling Vice Lords street gang, was convicted on multiple charges, including racketeering conspiracy, firearm offenses, and drug charges. His conviction was the result of a multi-year investigation into the gang's criminal activities, which included numerous acts of violence, such as murders, attempted murders, armed robberies, and assaults. The Wicked Town faction was heavily involved in drug trafficking and used violence to protect their operations. During the investigation, law enforcement seized over 45 firearms, significant quantities of and numerous rounds of ammunition. The gang also used social media to promote their activities and intimidate rivals and witnesses. Lee was found guilty of committing 3 murders and supplying firearms for additional killings. His conviction carries a mandatory life
Jason
sentence.
Brown, a.k.a. Abdul Jameh, gang leader, drug dealer, but the feds say he was working the streets for ISIS.
And tonight, CBS 2's Tara Molina shows us the feds' case against the accused homegrown terrorist.
Jason Brown, $500 cash in hand, finger in the air, smiling as he says, Allah knows. The image is from August 16th of this year, when, according to this federal complaint, Brown planned to, quote, knowingly provide material support and resources to a foreign terrorist organization. Brown's support? Money, at least 3 times, to who he believed was an ISIS militant.
Jason Brown is the leader of the AHK street gang. Prosecutors say this is him giving $500 to a man he thought would wire the money to an ISIS soldier. That man was really an informant for the feds. Federal agents could be seen going in and out of Brown's Lombard home yesterday. According to court documents, Brown required all members of his gang to convert to Islam. He actively recruited and radicalized members to support ISIS.
Jason Brown, also known as Abdul Jameh, is the leader of the AHK, a House of Knowledge, street gang based in the Chicago suburb of Bellwood. The gang comprises former members of other gangs, including the Black Pea Stones, Gangster Disciples, and Four Corner Hustlers. Brown, 37 years old and residing in Lombard, Illinois, was arrested in November 2019 for attempting to provide material support to ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq, and Al-Shem. He provided $500 in cash on 3 separate occasions to an individual he believed was supporting ISIS, who was actually an undercover law enforcement officer. In addition to his charges related to terrorism, Brown and other AHK members were involved in drug trafficking activities, distributing in the Chicago area. The AHK gang operated drug markets in Chicago's North Lawndale and Humboldt Park neighborhoods, and they often boasted about their activities on social media. Brown faces up to 20 years in prison for the material support charge. while other gang members face various sentences for drug-related offenses.
Leader of the Black Disciples gang is among nearly 24 people charged in a federal takedown.
They are all calling this a major win, taking down very high-ranking members of the Black Disciples street gang, including, as you mentioned, the leader of that gang. That man is Darnell McMiller. Here is a photo of him. He is known, police say, as Murder. CPD, along with its federal partners, worked on this case for several years with help from informants, and yesterday made these arrests.
Darnell McMiller, also known as Murder, is a prominent figure in the Black Disciples street gang in Chicago. At 34 years old, McMiller is described as the current leader of this notorious gang. He was arrested and charged as part of a comprehensive federal investigation into drug and gun trafficking that involved multiple high-ranking gang members. The investigation, which was led by the FBI and the Chicago Police Department, uncovered significant quantities of drugs and firearms. Law enforcement seized 24 firearms, more than 13 kilograms of over a kilogram. The investigation primarily targeted the Englewood neighborhood on the south side of Chicago, where much of the illicit activity took place. McMiller was specifically charged with conspiring to distribute, among other drug trafficking offenses. The charges against him and his associates were part of a broader effort to disrupt and dismantle the operations of the Black Disciples and related criminal activities. In addition to McMiller, other high-ranking members of the Black Disciples, such as Clarence January and Kenneth Brown, were also charged. The investigation highlighted more than 50 illicit transactions involving drugs and firearms, often captured through covert recordings by cooperating individuals. Gilbert Spiller, a high-ranking member of the Black P. Stone Nation gang, operated primarily in the Southside Chicago neighborhood referred to as Terror Town. Holding the rank of general, Spiller was involved in extensive criminal activities spanning over 2 decades, including drug trafficking and multiple violent crimes. In 2011, Spiller was arrested by the FBI and Chicago police, and later pleaded guilty to charges of selling and illegally selling a firearm. He admitted to selling approximately 62.2 grams of 13, 2011, and another 59.2 grams on July 21, 2011, to a confidential informant. Additionally, on October 18, 2011, he sold a loaded .40 caliber handgun to the same informant, knowing the buyer was a felon on parole. Spiller's criminal history includes convictions for aggravated battery with a firearm, aggravated discharge of a firearm from a drive-by shooting, and aggravated battery of a Chicago police officer. He admitted involvement in multiple shootings, believing he hit his targets in roughly half of these incidents. In February 2013, U.S. District Judge Charles Kokoras sentenced Spiller to 20 years in federal prison for his crimes. This sentence reflected the severity of his actions and his long-standing involvement in violent crime. Labar Broman Spann, a leader of the Four Corner Hustlers gang in Chicago, was convicted in 2021 for his involvement in a racketeering conspiracy that included multiple murders and other violent crimes. Spann was found guilty of orchestrating the murders of Maximilian McDaniel, George King, Willie Woods, and Rudy Rangel as part of his efforts to control drug trafficking and eliminate rivals. His leadership was characterized by extreme violence and intimidation, making him a feared figure in Chicago's criminal underworld.
I and those 23 members are part of a faction called Goonie Boss, and according to authorities, they are responsible for as many as 11 murders in and around the Englewood neighborhood. They say the Goonie Boss hit squad routinely terrorized the 3 square mile area where basketball hoops are makeshift, boarded up homes are commonplace, and the median income is less than $20,000 a year. Sources say the faction has been operating for years in the streets and alleys around 72nd and 73rd Street near Hermitage, Paulina, Marshfield, and Ashland. In addition to the 11 murders, Goonie Boss members are accused of being part of a gun trafficking group that burglarized a gun shop downstate. The 11 cases that make up the indictment date at least as far back as 2016, according to the Chicago Police Department. So far, authorities haven't said whether any of the murders happened on Englewood streets. The joint FBI and Chicago Police Department investigation has resulted in federal racketeering charges in addition to the state murder and gun charges. And the interagency cooperation was so extensive that Cook County prosecutors were actually deputized as federal prosecutors in order to maximize the level of potential punishment within the state and federal systems.
Romeo O-Dog Blackman is a leader of the Goonie Boss Goonie Gang, a faction of the gangster disciples operating in Chicago. Blackman, along with Terrence T. Smith and Jalicious Jojo Turman, was convicted on federal racketeering charges. The gang was involved in a violent crime spree that included multiple murders, attempted murders, and other violent acts aimed at protecting their territory in the Englewood neighborhood. Blackman and Smith were found guilty of multiple murders, including the killings of Stanley Bobo, Crystal Jackson, Andre Donner, Davin Horace, and Gerald Shaws. They also faced charges for attempted murders. These convictions came after a lengthy trial where jurors were presented with evidence of the gang's violent activities, including surveillance videos and social media posts where gang members boasted about their crimes. The investigation into the Goonie Gang revealed a pattern of extreme violence, with members regularly engaging in shootings and other criminal activities. The gang's operations and the subsequent legal actions against its leaders highlight the persistent gang violence in parts of Chicago and the efforts by law enforcement to combat it.
The Hobo Street Gang is a reflection of the realities and challenges we're facing right now. This was not the BDs or the GDs with thousands of members. This was a faction of factions, an intimate group with members that came from those different gangs, but who came together with a common vision and purpose to be the most violent, ruthless, and fierce street gang on the South Side in Chicago. They terrorized Chicago neighborhoods on the South Side for years. They dealt drugs, they committed robberies, including armed robberies. They tortured victims. They killed rival gang members. They killed rival drug dealers. And when one of their own sought to cooperate with our investigation, they assassinated him in cold blood in front of his girlfriend, in front of his small children.
Gregory Bowlegs Chester, also known as Big Homie and Pops, was a leader of the Hobo Street Gang in Chicago. The Hobos, a violent and tightly knit gang, were involved in numerous criminal activities, including murders, robberies, and drug trafficking. The gang originated from factions of the larger Gangster Disciples and Black Disciples, and primarily operated on the south side of Chicago. In a significant federal trial, Chester and other key members of the Hobos, including Paris Polarowski Poe, were convicted on racketeering charges. Chester was sentenced to 40 years in prison for his leadership role and participation in the gang's violent activities. The Hobos were notorious for their ruthless use of violence to maintain control over their territory and silence witnesses. Chester was charged with multiple murders, including the killing of government witness Keith Daniels in 2013 to prevent him from testifying. This murder was particularly brutal, carried out in front of Daniels' young stepchildren. The gang's activities were marked by a high degree of organization and willingness to use extreme violence, making them one of Chicago's most feared street gangs during their operation. The detailed profiles of these individuals illustrate the pervasive and violent nature of gang activities in Chicago. Law enforcement efforts have led to significant arrests and convictions, aiming to disrupt these criminal enterprises and reduce violence in affected neighborhoods. However, the ongoing battle against gang-related crime in Chicago remains a challenging and complex issue.
Follow our new channel, All Scoops Media Sports.